Hello, everybody. My name is Cody Heichel. I am a visual artist, a painter living in Indianapolis, Indiana, but I lived in Columbus for about 10 years. And I'm coming to you from my home studio. This is where I work every day. I create paintings and I sell them through different galleries in the United States. And I've been fortunate enough to be teaching this class called Cupcakes and Canvases for several years now. And this is my first time doing a lesson virtually. I hope it's fun for everyone. I hope that it's just as informative as an in-person lesson would be. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person, but hopefully this will be fun and everyone will be able to walk away with a painting that they're really happy with. I like to always make sure that everyone knows that our time together is a creative time, and everyone likes to create differently. And so I'm going to be making a painting, a nice landscape of a fall scene, as you're probably looking around and seeing the leaves, the colors of the leaves start to change. So I decided to do a painting with a tree and some falling leaves and some fall colors. So I'm going to recreate that with you here today. And I don't want you to feel like that's what you have to paint, though. This is your time to be creative. So if you want to paint something else, feel free. And for others, feel free to follow along step by step as I try to show you each way in detail how we're gonna make a painting start to finish. I've adjusted our process a little bit today so that hopefully everyone can get something out of this. I know we've got a wide range of ages out there, so I'm really excited to be sharing this with all of you. So I want to go over what materials you should have in front of you if possible. And first off, you want to have a canvas. So that's what you're going to be painting on. There's lots of different things you can paint on that. You can paint on cardboard, paper, all kinds of stuff. This is a nice little canvas, perfect for doing acrylic paintings like we're doing today. You should also have a pencil for doing a little bit of sketching and planning for our painting, and a couple brushes. Really, you could do this whole painting with just 2 brushes. So these are some examples of some smaller brushes, and these are some kind of medium and bigger size brushes. Really, you could do the whole painting just with a couple brushes. It's nice to have something a little bigger to cover those big areas, and something a little smaller for the little details. And then you're gonna want to have some kind of water container. I've just got this old Cool Whip container that does the job. You just wanna have a little water in there so that you can clean your brushes out in between each color. And then of course, you're gonna wanna have some paint. So today we are working with these colors, which is black, white, blue, and then the 3 warm colors, yellow, orange, and red. Now there's plenty of green in the scene, but we're gonna make our own green using a couple colors, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then one last thing, you probably wanna have some kind of paper towel or napkin. That way when you're washing out your brushes, you can wipe off some of the extra water. It's always nice to have a little bit of water in your brush when you're painting. It helps the paint move around a little more smoothly. But you know, it's nice to have a paper towel to wipe off some extra paint or wipe off extra water. And those really should be all the supplies. If you have a hair dryer, that can be helpful, but I made it to where it's not necessary for this painting in particular, okay? So once everybody has all their supplies ready to go, we'll go ahead and get started with the first step, okay? Okay, the first step that we're going to do for this painting is we're actually going to draw in just a couple lines. This will help us plan out where things are gonna go, and it'll just make things a little bit easier for us. We're not gonna get too detailed with it though. You don't wanna make a really intricate, tough, difficult drawing and then have to try to paint around everything. It's a little easier to start big with big shapes and then add some details right at the end. My art teacher used to always say, you have to bake the cake before you decorate it. So that really applies to painting. You wanna bake the cake, and then at the very end, we'll add all these tiny little details to it, okay? So first off, we're going to just draw a single line. And this is gonna be where the ground is. So this is gonna be where the ground and the sky come together. And the fancy name for that is the horizon line. So since we're doing a nice landscape, it doesn't need to be a perfect line. It can be a little wavy, it can be whatever you want it to be. I like to put a little bit of wave on it and a little bit of an angle, a little hill coming up here, okay? So I'm just gonna draw a real quick line coming up from side to side, okay? So that's really easy. From here down is gonna be our grass and maybe some fallen leaves down here. And from here up, that's gonna be our nice blue sky, okay? And then the other thing I'm just gonna add real quick, I'm just gonna figure out where I want my tree to go. I'm gonna have a nice big tree with some leaves falling off of it. And I'm just gonna figure out where it can go. And it can go anywhere. Often, instead of putting it right in the center, we like to kind of move it off to the side just a little bit. That makes it a little more interesting, and it lets your eye kind of bounce around and look at everything a little more instead of getting stuck right in the middle. So I'm gonna make a couple lines here, a little off to the side from the center. I'm just gonna bring them straight up, and you can see I'm just drawing a tree, just a basic trunk. These are a couple lines, and that's the start of the tree. And one nice way to make a tree is to pretend that you're drawing the letter Y. And some of you may not have gotten to that point yet, but this is what a Y looks like. It branches off into two separate paths there, okay? And that's one quick way to kind of start your tree. And you can bring it all the way off the top of the canvas there. And that's so what we're gonna do is later we're gonna draw all kinds of different limbs, but I wanna keep these shapes very basic at first, okay? And then maybe at the bottom, I might just kind of connect these two lines here. So that way we know this is where our tree is gonna be, okay? So it's very basic. And that's really all the line work that we're gonna need for right now. And if you're not pleased with where it is, feel free to give it a little erase and kind of change things around however you need to be happy with the general shape. We're also gonna paint over a lot of this, so this is just to give us an idea of where the paint's gonna go, okay? So that's just how we're gonna start out. Next step is that we're gonna start painting, okay? Now often I would have someone paint a whole background, and then once that's dried, I would draw on top of it. But we're trying to make this happen in one go. So we're going to, one of the reasons I wanted to keep this kind of simple is so that it's a little easier to paint around, okay? So the first color we're gonna mix up is a really nice light blue, okay? To do that, we're going to use white, a good amount of white, actually mostly white, and just a little touch of blue. You can see I just got a little bit of blue on there. And I'm gonna mix those colors up just a little on my palette until I get a nice light blue like this, okay? And I'm gonna start painting in the sky, okay? I like to start from top and work my way down. Top of the canvas and work my way down. So I'm gonna start painting the sky blue. And I'm gonna paint right up to the tree line that I drew in earlier, okay? And all the way from corner to corner. And I'm going to also fill in this little area in the middle of the tree. Now, don't worry if you're painting and you go over your line just a little, your tree line here a little bit. It's no big deal. We're gonna be painting in this tree a nice brown. There's gonna be a lot of different things going on. And if you go over the lines just a little bit, that's okay. That's fine. So you can see I'm starting to work my way across. If you want the sky to be a little bit darker, you can add a little more blue in your brush. And now you can see I'm starting to get a deeper blue at the top. And you can play around with this for a while. Acrylic paint is really fun and really nice because the drying time, it gives you some time to play around with it. But eventually it will start to dry, and then you're not going to be able to mix it up anymore. So that's why I prefer to work in little areas and brush and blend things around as much as I like. And then once I'm happy with how it looks, I work my way down a little bit. If I come back to an area that's already started to dry and I start to brush over top of it, it can start to kind of lift the paint off a little bit. So I like to get the area that I'm working with looking the way I want, and then I just move down a little bit. So again, you can see I'm building in that sky and coming straight down. I just keep adding a little bit of white and a little bit of blue into my brush. And you can see I'm not too worried about mixing them all together and making one color of blue. I actually like having some areas in my brush with a lot of white and other areas with a lot of blue. I just dip it in the white and I dip it in the blue, and then I mix it on the canvas. And when you do that, you see a lot of variation of the colors, and you'll see these blues blending with the whites there. And I like how that looks. It just makes it look a little more real instead of just one flat blue color. So we want to bring this blue all the way down to that line we drew. If you remember, that's called the horizon line. Again, this is where the grass is going to start. So we don't want to paint over top of that. We just want to bring the blue all the way down to that line. And I'm trying to make my brush strokes kind of go side to side. You know, it can add little clouds that way with some white paint while the paint's still wet. And you can just kind of experiment and play around and see how it looks. Again, you can see I'm painting over the tree lines here. That's not a problem, because what we're doing right now is we're painting the sky in the background. And what we're going to do after is we're going to paint this tree over top. So we're just going to cover that little bit of blue right up. So that's not a problem. But I'm doing my best to avoid painting the tree, just because it'll make it easier here in a little bit if that area is nice and white and dry. So here I go all the way down to the horizon line. And that's where I'm going to stop painting blue. Okay? And again, bringing it right up to that tree. And you'll kind of notice the paint will start to, as it's drying, it'll start to get a little tacky. You can kind of feel it on your brush. As you're brushing the canvas, it starts to kind of drag on. And once that starts happening, you should probably try to be finishing up painting that area. Now, if you want your paint to spread a little more easily, get a little water in your brush, just a little bit. I like to dab it in. You don't want water to be dripping off the brush, just enough to mix into the paint, and it'll thin it and it'll make it spread on your canvas a little easier. So I've made a nice blue sky now. And again, if I wanted to add maybe a nice cloud over here, I'm just gonna dip my brush just in white, and I can make a nice brush stroke there, maybe one or two, and then I'll just leave that alone. And then I've got a nice cloud over there. Maybe I'll add another cloud on this side. Just a couple strokes of just white paint. And I'm not blending it in quite as much as the other ones. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to be strategic, or we're going to think really hard about what order we're painting things in. Especially because we're trying to paint this in one go. Instead of doing a bunch of different layers, we're trying to just paint it one time. So while this sky is drying, while the paint's still wet, if we were to try to put the leaves on top, they would get a little messed up. They would mix into the blue and it wouldn't look quite as nice as we want it to look. It'll look a lot nicer if we can let the background up here, the sky, if it can be pretty dry, and then we paint the leaves on top of it, it'll look a little better. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna change and we're gonna focus on painting the grass, okay? So I'm gonna clean out my brush and we're gonna start mixing a new color. We're gonna mix green. So to make green, you just need to mix two colors together, okay? You need to mix blue and yellow. And I'm gonna start with a lot of yellow, okay? And I'm just gonna add a little tiny bit of blue, just a little bit. And you'll see when you mix those together on your palette, you get green. And so you can do a lot. You don't need to have all the colors in front of you to mix up and make new colors. There are some colors that you can't mix and make. For example, there's no colors that you can mix to ever make red, but you can mix colors to make purple. If you mix red and blue together, you'll get purple. And that's called a secondary color. Primary colors are colors that you cannot mix anything together to create. So you cannot mix anything to make yellow, to make red, or to make blue. But if you mix some of those together, you'll get new colors. So if you mix blue and yellow like we just did, you get green. And so I'm gonna use that nice mixture and I'm gonna start painting in the grass. And you can see it makes a really nice kind of yellowish green. And I'm doing the same thing as I did with the sky. I'm getting a lot of paint in my brush and I'm not really fully mixing it all together. I'll show you what I mean. If I were to mix all the paint together and mix and mix and mix and mix together, I'll end up with, I'm just swishing it around. You can see I've got one color. That is one flat color of green. And if I were to paint beside it, it just doesn't have the same, quite the same look as the one over here that has all these different colors kind of marbled together. So that's why instead of mixing it too much, I'm just dabbing my brush in some blue and in some yellow, and I'm letting the mixing happen on the canvas. I'll maybe get a little more yellow in my brush. And I'm going to bring it right over into that blue. Okay? And again, I'm going to bring that right up to that tree trunk. And we're going to do our best to paint around the trunk. And again, I'm just mixing blue and yellow. Now, if you want to lighten it up a little more, you could add a little white into the mix. And that's going to change the color a little, but it will lighten it up. And again, I'm using a lot of yellow so that it's a nice kind of lighter green. And you can really play around with all your brush strokes, and you can make all kinds of silly designs, and however you want to do it. It's your painting, so you need to feel free to be as creative as you want, and to experiment with brush strokes. Sometimes it's nice to take it really easy and just do some little dabs with your brush like that. And some people might want to swirl their brush around like that. There's all kinds of different ways that you can hold and kind of play with the brush and get different looks. So again, we're just filling this in all the way to the tree and off to the side. And since this paint is still wet, I'm just going to play around with some brush marks just a little bit more until I'm happy with how it looks. Now I'm noticing that this side is a lot more yellow than this side. So what I might do is bring a little more yellow over here, just so it's balanced. I like both sides to look kind of equal. And maybe a little more green over here. And there you go. So at this point, we should have a sky coming down and meeting into this grassy area. If you make a mistake, say you're making a brush mark and you go a little too high or something, there's a couple ways to look at that. Sometimes you could say, like Bob Ross would say, that's a happy accident. And maybe my brush went a little too high up into the sky there, but it kind of looks nice. It looks like there's little pieces of grass sticking up. So that could be called a happy accident. But if you don't like how that sounds and really you want to fix that, you want that to be blue again, the best thing to do is to wait until your painting is completely dry. You can touch it, you can move your finger and it's not picking up any paint at all. And then come back and get some blue on your brush and paint over that green. But if the paint's still wet and you try to put some blue over top to fix it, it'll kind of start mixing with the green and it just won't look as good as if you dry it off completely and then come back in and try to fix it, okay? But I like to go with the happy accident outlook because sometimes the things that you liked most about the painting were things that you weren't even trying to do. They can surprise you sometimes. Okay. So what we're going to do now, again, we're really thinking about what we're going to paint and when we're going to paint it. So the first thing we painted was the sky, and then we painted the grass. And we want both of those things to dry before we add the different kind of fall colors, the different leaves, the yellows and oranges and reds, those leaves that are falling down. We don't want that color to blend in with the blue and the green, so we're gonna let that dry for a little bit, okay? And to do that, what we'll do while those are drying is we'll work on our tree. So I'm going to, now this is a point where you could kind of use either brush. So far I've been using one of my bigger brushes. You could paint this tree with one of your smaller brushes, or you could use both. This shape is kind of a medium shape, so I'm probably going to switch back and forth depending on what I'm doing. So with these big trunks, I'm probably going to use my medium. And then once I'm doing some smaller limbs, I'm going to switch and use my small brush, okay? So speaking of mixing colors and making new colors, what color is a tree trunk usually? If you answered brown, that's what I would say. I'd say usually a tree trunk is brown, but we don't have brown paint. We can mix brown paint. So you could mix brown paint using a lot of these colors, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna take orange, a good amount of orange, and a tiny bit of black. And when you mix those together, you'll get a nice brown, a nice warm brown. And those are going to be the colors that we're going to use to paint in this tree trunk. And I'm using actually my smaller brush for this. And I'm gonna, just like how we did with the sky and just how we did with the grass, I'm letting the mixing happen on the canvas. So I'm dipping my brush in orange, making some marks, dipping my brush in some black, making some marks. And I'm bringing it all the way down into that grassy area. And now I'm going to start bringing it up into the sky. So you can see I want my tree to stop about halfway down the grassy area, but depending on how big you want your tree to be, you can come to wherever you want it to come to. And I'm just making kind of smaller marks. I'll try to bring it a little closer to the camera so you can see little tiny marks. And that can make it look a little more like tree bark. And again, now I'm going to paint all the way up to the sky. Through the sky and off the top of the canvas. And because we painted around that area and we left that area nice and white and dry, it's a little easier to fill in this tree now. And again, while we're doing this, the grass and the sky are drying off a little bit, which is good. That's what we want. And again, if you're painting this, we're getting into some areas that are a little more delicate, a little tricky. And so it could be easy to make a mark that you're not happy with. And maybe you went a little too far outside of the tree lines that you drew. That happens. And the same thing applies. If you aren't happy with a mark you made and you made it maybe a little too big or something, let the paint dry completely. It may take a little bit. If you have a hair dryer, you can dry it off in a matter of a few minutes. If you don't have a hair dryer, this paint will be pretty dry, probably in half an hour, 40 minutes or so. And then you come back and you can fix whatever the mistake was that, or the mark that you weren't happy with. Because at the end, you just want to be happy with what you did, and everyone's painting is going to look a little different, and everyone's trying to make something a little different. And there's just no right or wrong way to paint. But you've got to be happy with the piece. That's priority number one. All right. So now I've painted in the main tree structure. Now I might start making some extra little limbs here and there. Now, if you prefer to draw them in with a pencil first, just to kind of be careful, then that's a good option. But to do that, you would really want to make sure this background's nice and dry. I'm looking at my painting. I can see there's still a little wetness, but it's for the most part pretty dry. You can tell when an area is dry if you hold it to the light and it's really shiny and it looks wet. You can see, oh, that area is not quite dry yet. But other areas, once the surface looks a little more flat, and it's not as shiny, that means it's pretty dry. So I'm going to make some extra limbs coming off of the tree. I'm just going to use a small brush, and I'm going to have a limb maybe coming off of this way. And so I'm making another Y. And maybe I'll have it come all the way off the side of the canvas. And maybe I'll make another coming up like that. Now, the nice thing about a tree is no tree looks the same. Every tree looks a little different. A lot of trees have a lot of similarities, but they're a very organic shape, which means the lines don't need to be perfect and straight. It's actually nice to have them be a little wavy. And so I'm going to have that limb going off there. Maybe I'll have another one coming up here. Just little branches. And maybe I'll have another small one coming up this way. You can have as many branches as you want, or as few. If you only want one branch or two branches, you get to choose how many branches you want. You just want it to look right to you and to your eye, and to have it look like the painting you want it to look like. I might add just a couple more little branches here and there. And that's looking pretty good to me. That's enough branches for me. Now later, at the very end, we'll come in and add a couple little highlights and things here and there. But for now, I'd like to start adding in the leaves, okay? At this point, the grass is looking pretty dry for the most part. The sky is looking pretty dry. Again, if your painting's not completely dry and you have a hair dryer, take a minute and just run the hair dryer over it, and you'll see it'll dry real fast with a hair dryer. Another tip that you can do, if you don't have a hair dryer, just wave it up and down like that for a few minutes. Flap like a bird, and it'll start to dry off, okay? All right. So the last little bit of this painting is we gotta make the leaves. Again, so it's fall. Fall's coming, or is it here? I'm not even sure. And you'll see all the leaves turn from green to orange and yellow and red and all these really beautiful warm colors. So we're going to use those colors and paint in some leaves. I'm going to use my small brush again. And again, red, orange, yellow. If you want to add a little bit of white in the mix every now and then, that'll make for some lighter colors. And so you can see I've just got all kinds of warm colors on my brush here. And I'm going to start on the ground where some of the leaves have fallen, okay? And you can see I'm just going to make little dabs of paint. Just little dots here and there. And I'm going to change the colors often, okay? So if I make a few yellow ones, maybe I'll switch and do some orange ones. Maybe I'll do some red ones. And I'm also making big dots, small dots, different sizes and shapes. Maybe some clusters. So maybe here a bunch of leaves have fallen. And I'm going to put them, you know, it's up to you to decide how many leaves have fallen off the tree. Maybe only a couple. Maybe it's, you know, fall has just started and so you're just starting to see a couple little leaves, or maybe almost all the leaves have fallen off the tree. And now maybe there's no leaves up here and they've all fallen on the ground. You know, this is where you get to choose what you want your painting to be and how you want it to look. So again, I'm just adding some little red dots all the way across, all over the grass, maybe a little smaller here and there. And we got leaves all over the ground. And I'm going to add some leaves up in the tree too, just for example. You don't have to add leaves in the tree if you want them all to be on the ground. But I'm going to go and I'm going to add them near where the limbs come. So on top of all the different limbs, I'm going to add some little dots of fall colors, nice warm colors here and there. And every now and then I'm just making these dots, and then I'm gonna get some new color on my brush. I'm constantly getting new paint on my brush. Maybe a little up here. Now this tree paint might still be a little wet. Sometimes things dry really quickly, but if it's a little wet and you're dabbing your different leaves on here, and then you see that they're kind of starting to turn a little brown, and you don't want that, just wash your brush off, wash it off in the water, dry it off on your paper towel, and then start again with some fresh color. Maybe I'll just do some pinks, using a little red and white will make a nice pink. And I'm just, again, making little dots wherever I feel like they should go. And it's up to you. Maybe I'll do this just so you can see. Maybe there's some little leaves that are actually falling right now, falling onto the ground. And they're kind of blowing around in the wind a little bit. Now, I'll tell you, this is a little tricky because once you start putting marks right in the middle of the sky, that's a sensitive area. If you make a mark that you're not happy with, it's a little harder to cover up. But, you know, as long as we're having fun, I like to add some leaves that are actually falling off of the tree too. Okay, so at this point, we've pretty much done the whole painting. But this is where you get to look at your painting and decide if there's anything else you'd like to add that would help it out. something I'm going to do is add some little highlights on my tree branches, okay? And what I mean by highlights is little areas where the sun is hitting the branches. And so we made orange earlier using black, or excuse me, we made brown earlier using black and orange. Now I'm going to add a lot of white to the mix. I'm going to get a really nice light orange in my small brush. And on the top of these branches, I might add a little bit of really light brown, or you could even just get some white on your brush and just use white. You can see I'm adding little white highlights here and there. Maybe I'll put one over here so you can see that this branch comes in front of that one. And just putting little highlights here and there. You could even put some highlights on the leaves too. I'm going to pick a side of the tree and maybe put a little white highlight coming down the side there. It kind of makes the tree feel a little more real, like the sun's hitting it. Now you don't need to do this part, but it's just some little extra details I like to add at the end. And then, like I said, what we're doing now is just seeing if there's any other areas that we want to finish or fix or add anything to make sure that we're happy with the painting that we made. And I think I'm happy with that. So at the end, you can see we made just a single tree in the middle of fall with some leaves hanging on, some blown in the wind, and some have fallen down on the grass. Hopefully this has been easy to follow along with, and you've been able to, feel creative. And I'd love to see what you guys came up with. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again. I hope you all are enjoying the season, enjoying as fall's here. I hope you all are staying safe. It's really been a pleasure spending some time with you, even though we're not physically together. It was a lot of fun to do this. So I hope you all had fun, and we'll see you again. Take care.